Hello, how's it going? Let me just make sure everything's good. Um, I am Robin Rosado, Director of Instruction for Top Speed Golf. Obviously, I'm not Quentin, who normally does these on a daily basis. Really quick, can I have someone just say that you can hear me and you can see me okay? Because I don't do this. I rarely do these, so I want to make sure technically I'm in good shape. If someone can just type in super fast that you can hear me, that's fine. Oh, good. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Okay, good. So I am director of instruction here for Top Speed Golf in Orlando. I'm actually located here in our offices here today. Normally I would do these at home, but I have two young kids who like to bang on my door. And what I normally do here for Top Speed is I do run all of our clinics when we will have them here hopefully soon, as well as I'm currently doing in-person lessons here in Orlando, where we're all located here at Heathrow Country Club. So if in-person lessons is something that interests you, you want to come in, let me know. Shoot me an email, robin@topspeedgolf.com. And as well as I do the unlimited reviews, just like Quentin. So I hope I can measure up to him. He does an amazing job with these here. So why don't we just go ahead and dive into it? I saw some questions that were sent in prior to me even starting this. Let's go to the first one, which is John A. He goes, I struggle with consistency in getting into my left side. Watching videos, I think I see a climbing up the trail leg on the backswing, dipping the knees on the downswing, and climbing up the leading leg on the follow through, head steady through. Would you comment? Um, so what I'm looking at what you're saying there, John, it's there's a couple of factors. Obviously, everything's so specific to the person without even seeing your swing. I know you said you struggle getting to the left side, so I'm assuming that you're not really sliding, which you see normally like a little bit of a lateral shift as far as a slide. What may benefit for you, John, is a little bit more on what's happening into your feet. So ground pressure wise. So I'm just going to run somewhat quickly on how we shift our weight to our backswing in our feet and how we shift our weight to our downswing to help you rotate, and of course for you specifically, John, get to your left side. So it's actually really important that we do shift our weight onto our backswing. So when we do take the club head back, right, we technically do shift our weight right away. Now, as we're gradually shifting our weight into our trail leg, so for you, right leg, roughly when we get to here, when left arm is parallel to the ground to the backswing, we actually should be fully loaded there into the right side already into our leg. From there, I'll try to show you here really quick. From there, as we load up here, then it's a torso rotation to the very top of the swing, torso and shoulder rotation to the top. So having that load fairly early into your trail leg allows that kind of disassociation to the downswing to where your weight can shift over to your left side, and it'll want to kind of naturally, because it's already loaded and you're rotating, so now your muscles are going to want to contract. And so for you, that weight shift will go into that lead foot, and then that'll help you rotate open. So I think that's what's going to help you out there, John, is actually the weight shift into the backswing early and how that transfers to the weight shift there into the downswing. Obviously, drills like the step drill are going to be really good. The sumo step drill are really good for you. Things like in the compression line series are really good. But how we load up into the backswing is actually, and you hear that a lot on tour, is actually really important to how we get back to our lead side there on the way down. So hopefully that answers your question there, John. William P. asks, I am consistently having the same issue with short irons and a ball below my feet. I hit it the anticipated distance straight, but very low, so the shot ends up going too far, suggestion. So it sounds like there, William, that you are catching it thin. If it's a short irons and below the feet, the ball below your feet, we are going to get a little bit more kind of bend into our knees. We are going to potentially be a little bit more over the ball than we normally do. And that's just more of a basic actions or fundamentals thing in your setup position alone there, William, to help you when that ball is below your feet. Now, be in mind, when the ball is below your feet, it is going to have a tendency to leave the face open. And of course, now your angle of attack is going to come slightly more up on the ball. So meaning that if you already, this is just hypothetical here, William, if you already are are struggling with, like, let's say a little too handsy, maybe a little bit of a flip, well, the ball below your feet is going to really emphasize that. So again, it sounds like you're catching it thin if it's going too far. So my suggestion, other than just being a little bit more over the ball, weight, having a little bit more, I guess you're saying a little bit more squatted here, more over when the ball's below your feet. You're going to stand a little bit closer to it as well. You want to account for that you're going to potentially fade it more than you normally do. So line up a little bit more left of your target than you normally would. On a technique wise, what I would really, really focus on, and we talk about this a lot on the website, is that lead wrist being really bowed or creating a lot of shaftling, making sure you don't get any sort of hand action when that ball gets below your feet, because it's going to emphasize that a little more. So we want to make sure that we're still generating a ton of shaftling and almost feel like you're holding off on it. Now, like I said, it will promote more of a fade, so you have to kind of account for that there, William, when that ball's below your feet. It should help you hit the ball more solid. That's what it sounds like. And then again, I would actually potentially, it'll take some practice, but I would potentially account for a little bit of a loss of distance, because when you're throwing your hands at it and that ball being below your feet, you're going to add loft to the face a tiny bit. Not unless you really, really de-loft it a ton, but you're going to add a little bit of loft to the face. And so then that ball's going to go high and not as far as you normally do. So hopefully that helps there, William, when it comes to, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like you're catching it a little bit thin. David K. Robin, I'm making good contact and I feel for both chipping / pitching when I can take back at least to hip height and make a nice little swing. Anything shorter and I am a mess. So anything shorter, you're a mess. Okay. Any secret for short distance chips, pitches, particular just off the green, 5 to 10 yards out? I need to get up and down more. There's a couple of factors, obviously, with not really seeing that, what's going on, but it sounds like potentially when the swing is shorter, this is just what I see consistently here, David. So hopefully this helps you out. I actually have a club here. I don't have a wedge, so I'll try to do this the best I can. When we see kind of a shorter stroke, I usually see a lot of, I'm not hitting wires here, like a very quick acceleration here on the way through. Like, so it's almost short in the back a lot through on these little short 5-10 yard chips. And so that kind of creates a little bit of a yippy motion, I guess you can say, causing you to thin it and cause you to chunk it. So actually what may be beneficial for you is if you have more in the back and less on the way through. So it would look almost more like this. So you're not jabbing at it, you're not trying to create tension, but look more as a chip shot further and more here. So you see that a lot. You look at a lot of tour players when they're around the greens, you'll see their chipping motion more of a backstroke and more and short of a through stroke, allowing the hands to remain ahead of the golf club. So that's what's kind of a standard chip shot there, David, as far as, you're not going to get a ton of spin on it. You're not, it's just really kind of solid contact, making sure the hands are ahead and we're not getting too yippy. Of course, you're still accelerating as you're doing that, but I almost kind of guarantee that you're going to have a little bit more control when you have more of that more backswing. Of course, you're going to have to equate to, get the practice to equate for distance control and less through swing there on the way through, making sure the hands are ahead slightly. You don't want to get too handsy and flip your hands at all. So hopefully that helps you out there, David. That's a good question. I'm working a lot on my chipping here lately because it struggles. Also, next question from David. On video, I've noticed I continue to flip my hands late at the ball. So potentially, since you mentioned their full swing, that might be happening a little bit into the wedges. That's just what I see mostly with a lot of people I give lessons to. I get good lag, rotation, hands get low, doesn't look like a cast, but then my hands always seem to stop at the ball and don't get forward to give nice forward shaftling. How does this affect the end product, and what can I do to fix? It might be if you have good rotation now, meaning that I'm assuming when we say impact and we're talking about impact for your hands there, David, it means that you have good rotation when it comes into your downswing. Like, you can have good rotation to your backswing, but what's massively important, so if you're giving yourself a little bit of help into the hands, let's say potential flip, it sounds like a little bit of a flip. Normally, without seeing your swing there, David, normally it's because that we are not rotating the hips open their impact. So kind of biomechanically, it's just not going to work out for us. So if our hips stay too square here and the hands keep going, that momentum is going to flip the hands here. So we got to make sure we're rotating these hips open in order for us to keep shaft length. And then the last thing I'll suggest, honestly, as you go through the website and as you get really familiar with our top speed golf system, go through the stable fluid spine series. I'm sorry, the straight line release series. And so what that focuses on is, of course, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, that focuses on this position here. In order for us to get to this position here, arms are extended out here. We have to be rotating our body open. So sometimes it helps people there, David, that when we focus on the straight line release and trying to get to that straight line release, a lot of people actually naturally begin to rotate open better. So I would say, if you haven't done so in a while, take a look at the straight line release series, and put a focus on that. But I think for you, I mean, if you're rotating open there and you're still giving yourself a little bit of a flip, then it might just be a muscle memory thing where, you see a lot of guys on tour now where even post impact, you'll see a lot of leadless bowed, going through the ball. So potentially there, David, is just kind of over exaggerating that motion of hands ahead, lead versus bowed, even past impact a little bit. Google up like Bryson DeChambeau impact position or Colin Morikawa impact position. A lot of guys, a lot of young guys, you'll see a lot of them where their leaders is very, very bowed, even post impact there. That was a good question. Really good question. Rick B asks, I'm having a problem with my downswing to where I can't seem to stop either coming across the ball or just pushing my drives. Even when I try to close the driver club face, it still push slices. If I try to come inside to out, it even gets worse. What? Okay. So obviously, I would say it's kind of the same deal there, Rick. I'm trying to paint a picture of your swing. So it sounds like you're coming over the top, or you can come over the top, and obviously you leave the face open, and it's creating that slice. If you close it down and you release it, you can also hook it that way, but it's very, very rare. And then the second part is when you try to swing more into out and you try to shallow your plane, you just still leave the face open, and it causes still like a block to the right. So it's, not to sound repetitive from other questions there, Rick, but it sounds like sequencing again seems to be an issue into your downswing, whether you can still swing into out, but if our lower body isn't starting the downswing first and not rotating open, then it's going to make it very difficult for us to get the face square. So what I would take a look at for you there, Rick, is like if you look at yourself on video, always recommend doing that. Again, and I'm saying this because this is so consistent with so many people, is in the downswing here. Hopefully you guys can see me. In the downswing, we need to make sure that we're rotating these hips open. So if my sequencing starts with upper body going this way before my lower body, obviously you can see here, I'll try to keep my hips square, be kind of cutting across it, and I can leave the face open. But if I also don't rotate the hips open, I come more into out, you can see here that I can also chicken wing, and I can flip my hands and leave the face open and add loft to the face. So it sounds like what I would probably do there, Rick, is the first thing I'd have you do is first check to see your rotation, make sure that your hips are rotating open by the time you're there at impact, and you are kind of starting your downswing with lower body. That's I would just check that to see if that's happening. If then I would work on a little bit on, for you, since you already know how to work the path into out, if we get where you're working your hips rotating open, make sure you get that feel for the path working into out. But then I would have you work on club face awareness. So things like in the ball striking masterclass, which is like an amazing program that we have, helps you with, understanding the club face awareness. If they're open, if it's closed, obviously toe to heel. So what I would probably have you working on, excuse me there, Rick, is, let me go ahead and raise this volume here, is making sure that we're getting that face squared early. So here's the deal. What I see a lot of people do in the downswing, to get the face square or closed, they'll do this. And that technically closes the face. See that there? It's closing the face, but I'm flipping my hands. So what we want is more of this. So I'm twisting my face and I'm de-locking the face and squaring up. Obviously, I'm over-exaggerating this motion here, Rick. So as you work on here first, try to get a little bit more shallow with your playing, but then work here. If you find yourself hitting it right as you're rotating open and you're swinging more into out, that's a good thing. That means the path is there. That means the club face is just open. And so that means you can get that twisting motion there to get the face squared and de-lofted. Hopefully that helps there, Rick. And let me know how it goes. Diane asked me, can you share? Oop, I just lost where I was. Sorry, Diane. There we go. Can you share the wrist moves at takeaway that Clay showed in G115? Let me see. I'm not obviously super familiar. I'm familiar with the website, but not just through the numbers wise. So I'm sorry there, Diane, that I don't know specifically what video that is. Excuse me. So right away into the takeaway, let's just kind of talk about that really quick there, Diane. Ideally, we don't really want to have a lot of wrist set there or really a lot of motion there into the wrist. There are two things that I see very consistent when it comes to the takeaway, when it comes to too much movement in them. First one is this. Here, when you take the club back, a lot of extension flexion, so the club head works too much inside. See my hands here? They work too much this way, and the club is now working too much inside the hands. A lot of people do that in order for them to feel like they need to come inside and swing that way. That just promotes, when this club head gets too far inside here, that gets that club head too unstable back here. So we got to stabilize it back out by, again, flipping our hands at some point into the downswing. So that's number one that I see, which is more common than the second one. The other one is just a quick pick up here at the wrist. And that's more now radial deviation, wrist set this way. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. You get to a really good position. You can still play great golf with that one, either one really. But you're just inviting the idea of instability in the club head. And of course, what most people do to stabilize it back out, they early release the hands and flip at it. So that's why ideally, and you see a lot of tour players do this when they sit up to the ball, they'll sit up to the ball and you'll see a lot of players go like this in their first move. So if you look at this here from the down the line view, you see a lot of players go here. So as you can see, there's nothing that's changed. So if I set up to the ball here, there's nothing that's changed in my wrist angles here in the first move. So I have my wrist here, and I take it to the first, let's call this position one just for reference sake. My wrists have not done anything, but what I've done is I've turned my shoulders, my arms, and my hands, got a little weight shift here into my right side at the same time. So that's what you hear a lot of what's called a one-piece takeaway. And that's what's actually happening, is that one-piece takeaway. So we're here, boom, first move here. Then from this position here there, Diane, then what we have is more radial. The wrists begin to set gradually, so then we have more radial deviation wrist set. So if you want to think of here, this is about average amount of wrist set. Average when lead arms parallel to the ground, you'll see roughly about a 90-degree angle here. So if we look from this position here, to be more exact, we'll see my wrist to here, maybe button and club is just pointed barely just inside, so inside the golf ball here into the backswing. Some guys are a little bit more flat. Some guys are more upright. I'm just talking about the averages. It's not really a big, and there's not somewhere that you have to be on a consistent basis when it comes to your backswing. But hopefully that helps you out when it comes to your wrist set. So again, it's more one-piece takeaway as you see here. And then from, let's call this again, position one, we gradually begin that wrist set to more thumbs up, radial deviation, a little bit of flexion extension. And then we rotate there to the top of the swing. You might have a little bit more wrist set there at the very top, and that allows you to shallow the club down on the way down. So hopefully that answers your question. Sorry, that was a long explanation on what the wrist set is, what the wrists are doing in the first movement to the takeaway. But to put it simply there, Diane, it's not a lot. But the most important thing is we got to make sure that we're keeping everything somewhat together in that very, very first move there, Diane. Okay, good question. So Rob R says, asks, I recently advised to stand about 4 to 5 inches closer to the ball. That's a lot. That's a lot closer. So that's a big difference. So either you're really, really far away there, Rob, or um, I don't know. Although I felt like I was crowding the ball at first. First competitive round was good, 41 points off 13. That's awesome. That's really, really. It's if anybody knows stable forward, like 41 points is that's some good shooting there for sure. There, Rob. Awesome. Any basic advice on what good distance is from the ball? You know what the implications are. Arms are connected to chest and hips, maybe rotating easier. Interested in TSG views. Well, there's a factor there that we can't generalize how far you're standing away from the ball, to put it simply, and that's how everyone's built. Because like for me, I have a longer torso in relation to my legs, so I am going to be more. I'm not going to be able to bend over the ball as much as you see, let's say, maybe even Tiger, right? And I'm going to be more kind of like where Rory is at. His posture is going to be more here. Well, some guys you see on tour more here. Like Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson are more here. My posture is going to be more here because I have a long torso here. So me bending over more is going to get me very cramped up here. Then from there, Rob, it's as we get into our posture. So my recommendation for everybody is to always get into our golf posture here. So let's do a test here. Get my setup here. I'm going to place this 6-iron underneath my chin. I'm going to stand straight up, hold it here with both of my hands. I'm sure a lot of you have seen like a video of us doing this. And you're going to bend at your waist there, and that's going to be pretty much the most I can go. So this club here is stopping me, as you can see here behind me. I can't go much further than that if I maintain my spine. A little bend into the knees here. So now I'm in my posture. So the one thing is my hands, if they're out here, they're unnatural. Now it kind of goes against a little bit what Bryson DeChambeau does. He's a little bit of an outlier there. He does have more of his try to have more of a one plane thing. So does Mo Norman. But if we really want to go on how we're built individually, as we get into our posture here, my hands are going to hang more. Let me get to where I'm better angle here. My hands are going to hang more natural, roughly below my shoulders here. So on average, if you want to put a number or an average to it, our hands do hang pretty much in line with the front parts of our shoulders right here. And that's where my arms are hanging naturally. So that's kind of where you want to be. So it's not too crowded in. Obviously, I'm not reaching for it. Now, the factor is the second part of your question there, Rob, is that if you're reaching for it, what that does is, that promotes more of a flatter plane in a way, but in more of an in-to-out plane, but also restricts hip rotation here. So all you're going to do is pretty much just swing around your lower body with not a lot of hip rotation if we're too far out here. If we're too cramped in, of course, that can do the same thing. Maybe if you're really, really good, it'll force you to feel like you can rotate open. So maybe that's what happened for you there, Rob, is that when you got a little bit closer to the ball, it allowed you to rotate more open out of the way. But of course, you can come over the top by doing that. So we don't want to be too cramped, but we want to be more natural. So get into your posture first. Allow your arms to hang more natural for you personally there, Rob. And that's kind of generally where you're going to be. Weight distribution too between feet. We don't want to be too much on heels at address. We don't want to be too much into the toes at address. We want to be ideally right into like the laces or the middle of our feet at our address position. So not even too much into the toes. And so hopefully that helps you as far as, maintaining, or I should say it helps you rotate better. That's really important, and make sure you're not reaching for it too much. But 4 to 5 inches is quite a bit there, Rob. But it seemed to work out well for you. So it sounds like it helped you rotate your hips open there and stay a little bit more connected, which is, a really good thing for the golf game and what we believe in as well. George M asks, so that's a great question, by the way, Rob. Really good. I was having a bit of a struggle with my swing, and I reviewed the stable fluid spine material. It fixed me up. Awesome. What are the 3 fundamental foundations for the swing in the Top Speed Golf system? Well, we have 5, and one of them is the Stable Fluid Spine series is number 1. And then you're going to the Power Turn series From there, you're getting to the lag series, and then your compression line series, and then the straight line release series. So those are the core foundations. Oh, you asked me what are the other three foundations? So are those three? It's the lag, the compression line, and the stable fluid spine series. I think you, and also the power turn. The move section isn't quite part of our core system because there are plenty. Like you look at Phil Mickelson and Gary Woodland, both major champion winners, and who are a little bit steep in their transition here. And the move section talks to us shallow in the club, and both of them are right about here in the transition. You know, a little bit of a, I don't know, outlier with it is that they both do hit cuts. So that's why it's not quite in our core fundamentals as far as our system is concerned, but it is a very important aspect. So it's kind of like our sixth man, to put it simply there. But yeah, that's amazing there, George. The stable fluid spine series already made a huge impact for you. So my theory then on your swing, if that made a massive difference in your swing, then or in your game, then probably the compression line series and the straight line release series will be also very beneficial for you there, George, because it sounds like there's a sequencing thing happening in your downswing to where maybe lower body isn't starting the downswing early enough, and maybe you're not rotating open. And the straight line release series kind of ties that in with how do you release the club. So potentially for you there, George, you're releasing the club a little early or casting from the top here or closer to the ball. And so then you're not releasing the club more out in front like we discussed in the straight line release series. So that's more of what, if I were to give you some things to kind of, I don't want to necessarily say jump ahead, but my theory for you is that that's what it's going to be the next most beneficial thing for you, other than a 20-minute distance fix, of course. I'm going to apologize that I'm going to say this name wrong. Oyo. Let's go. Sorry that I'm butchering that. How would you hold the club grip? Should it change at all? No, not necessarily. Maybe depending if you're purposely trying to hit a draw hook, you might strengthen your grip up a little bit. And then maybe if you're trying to hit fade or anything, you may weaken the grip up a little bit. Maybe with wedges, your grip's going to be a little bit weaker. The main thing is I'll run with you on like my grip and what I do. It's all a little relative, all a little personal. What I would recommend there for you, Mr. O, is to go on the search bar in the top right corner and type in just grip, and there should be several videos. I know I did one. I know that Quentin Q did one. I'm sure Clay did one as well. So there should be several videos that talk about the grip. Now, the type of grip I personally use is interlock. It's just, I don't know. I guess I grew up in the Tiger era. That's why I choose interlock. There's a lot of people with overlap in baseball. All three are really, really good. My preference is just interlock, and that's what I've done pretty much my whole entire career of playing golf. Now, when we look at my grip's going to be strong to a little bit stronger than neutral. So I'm laying the grip across these basic three fingers here. You can almost take a grip into my left hand with these fingers, and then I create more of a trigger finger in my left finger and thumb. Like if I were, nothing to say, but if I'm actually literally holding a gun, that's kind of the same motion there. So then that gets me to where my left hand thumb is just on the, so if this is the center of the grip, it's lying just on my right, your left side of the grip there. So that gives me a fairly strong grip. I see 2.5 knuckles here, almost 3 there at this point. And then my right hand, again, I interlock here. Same deal. I'm feeling my grip more onto the base of these 3 fingers here, pinky, ring, and middle finger. And then again, I'm creating more of a trigger finger here, trigger with my thumb and index finger. So it's going to go here as I'm interlocking my grip, and I take my grip there. So now my right thumb is lying on the left side of center grip. So now both hands are roughly doing the same thing. I feel my grip more into my fingers, and I guess you can say the V's here pointed at roughly at my right pec to right armpit. So that gives me kind of a stronger, slightly stronger to maybe a little bit of a neutral grip. Very kind of standard what you see right now. This is really strong here kind of like more on like DJ is going to be right here, right hand here. This is actually very weak here, more like that. And so it's all very relative to your swing, but that's kind of generalized grip there for you, Mr. O. But it doesn't necessarily change other than if you're trying to do something a little more at the golf ball draw or fade. Maybe it will change a little bit, but not massive changes. Derek asked, Derek R, I'm getting steep with my 60-degree wedge. Any good ideas to correct that? It's really good, actually. What I would probably do is, I would work a little bit on, depending on the player that you are, not to say that this requires you to be a really good player by any means here, Derek, but I probably would recommend this for better players is to understand bounce of the wedge. I don't have a wedge right here next to me, but for those who don't know, like this is a 6-iron. This is an old one of Clay's really old clubs here. If this is a wedge, this would be right here about the bounce of the club. So if you can understand hitting it with the bounce of the club naturally, that will. So if you imagine the club coming again, if this is a wedge coming more this way, even off the turf, you may hit it really high just at start, and you may not hit it that great at first. So you have to kind of figure it out to where you are hitting the ball more solid. But if you can understand the bounce, naturally what that will do is that will shallow your plane in order for you to get that bounce going. So if we're coming too steep, we bring too much leading edge and better players into the ball. And of course, that causes you to get a little bit chunky. And then, of course, maybe you'll flip your hands a little bit as well. The other factor, so you mentioned there's steep, is potentially, this is again, without seeing your chipping motion or wedge motion, I would potentially try to pay attention to wrist set. How much you're setting your wrist into your backswing. Now, it's okay to have wrist set. I don't want to say that's a bad thing, but potentially there, Derek, to make it a lot less. So think of like an over-exaggeration like Steve Stricker, who when he's hitting wedges, he literally has no wrist set. It's almost like say this, and he rotates through and kind of maintains the same angle to his angles of his wrist. So it's not like this, where I see that very common for wedges. A lot of people will go set, and then they'll kind of get a little flippy with the hands, a little bit too much wrist set. So if you feel like you have less and you're just rotating through the ball, again, very Zach Johnson and Steve Stricker-like, and also Jason Day, all three players who are amazing wedge players, they try to eliminate their timing of their hands as much as they can, strictly for consistency and strictly for consistency and distance and consistency and strike as well there, Derek. So those are the two things. I'd probably do the wrist thing first, seeing if you have too much wrist set, mostly into the backswing, and then I would understand the bounce for you. But that's honestly about it. I think that's just what most common things I see when we're potentially a little too steep there. All right, so oops, lost my spot again. I'm sorry. Mike S. Hey, Robin, good to see you on here. I've been working on my hip rotation that you have been. Mike Sukata, the Sukatas, it's so good to hear from you, Mike. I miss seeing you here. Hopefully your house renovations are going well. Sorry about that, but Mike is a in-person student of mine that I see here semi-regularly, and him and his wife, the whole family are incredible. The Sukatas are incredible. I love you guys. All right, so I've been working on hip rotation that you have been helping with in our lessons. Have you watched your pros versus AMs gears video about hip rotation? I have seen several videos on pros versus AMs hip rotation from a lot of great, mostly going to be from the guys. Oh my gosh, what's the name of their YouTube channel? Sean Munn's the guy. Athletic Motion. There we go. Athletic Motion. Those guys who do a lot of 3D models on hip rotation in the swing, AMs versus pros. So AMs wise, to very generalize it here, Mike, you see a lot of lateral movement in the hips. So not a lot of partially weight transfer. So you see, I'm going to exaggerate this in hip rotation. You see a lot of this in amateurs, here to here. So you can see how it's like shifting my spine. And so if you look from this angle here to here. So lateral movement. I mean, yes, there's a little bit of rotation there. And the other side of it is actually in the backswing there, Mike, is you see a lot of over rotation here into the hips, into the backswing. There is a point where we can get too over rotated with our hips. And now potentially what we're inviting is reverse pivot, or if we over rotate, it makes it difficult for us for the sequencing to clear out of the way in time. So to put it simply, in order for us to understand hip rotation in the swing, we also have to understand ground pressure and how we're shifting our weight. So if we shift our weight early into the takeaway, which we should, that allows that pressure. So if I'm applying pressure into the ground here, that allows my trail hip to go back and slightly up. And average, by the way, is about 10 degrees higher with the right hip than the trail hip into the backswing. So as I push back with my, let's say, trail heel to middle of foot, I'm pushing my right hip back to where I'm creating, hip depth here into my trail hip. Then as I transfer it into downswing, so I'm going here and I'm again applying pressure now into my lead foot. And that pressure, ideally, you want to get that more going into our lead heel. That lead heel is pushing now my lead hip. So this is my downswing wise. I'm pushing that lead hip up and back. And again, average wise is about 20 degrees higher with the trail hip on the way down, especially by the time you're impact. So you look at here, left side is going to be, I'm somewhat over exaggerating this, but my left side is going to be higher than my right as I come down to impact there. So again, the hip is going more back and not out, too much out and then around, which I see a lot of, especially into the downswing. Backswing wise, we see a lot of too much over rotation here into the backswing. And there is a point of that as well. So Mike, hopefully that answers your question. I know that we've been working on that as far as shallowing the club there as well. But it's great to hear from you. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you, Mike, and I miss you guys a ton. It's very hot right now outside to do lessons. I will say that. So Dave S., great question, Mike. Really, really good. Hopefully that answers your question. Dave S. asks, just starting back at TSG, welcome back. On grip, can you share short thumb, long thumb, and why I want to use one over the other? That's actually really good. I probably should have explained that when I just went over the grip a second ago. So short thumb, long thumb. Short thumb is going to be more, so let's say here, short thumb, long thumb, which we see a lot there with a lot of amateurs. So there's a lot of disconnect with long thumb. Actually, if we say long thumb here, there's not a lot of stability here with the long thumb. So actually with shorter thumb, we have a lot of stability here. So to put it simply, if you were to grip this with only your index finger and your thumb, you would grip it like this. You would short thumb it every single time. It's almost impossible to grip it with a long thumb, almost. But there's a lot of stability here. Like the club, if you try to hold it here, it's a lot of instability in that club head. And the club head feels really, really heavy when you do that. So if I can grip it all day, and this is my left hand. Oh, let's see if you can see this here. This is my left hand with a short thumb and left index finger. And I have a lot of stability here. Like I can have a lot more control with this face in the club head when I do that. Not to say you want to have control of it, but you don't want to have a lot of tension. So that's the difference in why it's actually more beneficial for us to have short thumb is more stability in the grip. And again, you pair both of those hands up here. Now you have more of a connected grip here. You see, and then so you have a more unified grip holding onto the club, and of course creating more stability, and you have more control of the club face there, Dave. So that's a really good question. I actually haven't talked about that in a extremely long time. William B asks, trying to load up my body with higher hands, my swing gets too loopy. Any help? So of course, without seeing your swing there, William, excuse me, sorry about this. The potential, what's happening is that I would say that you're probably, if your swing is getting too loopy, you might be changing the path of your hands too much. Meaning that, let me go ahead and show you here. Let's just say here there, William, that you're going into your backswing and you're getting your hands a lot higher here at the top. And when he's saying loopy, it's like maybe you're getting to where you're going like this. And you can see there by looping it, I've changed the direction of my arm path a lot. So when we shallow, let's think of like who's a great player that has like that perfect, to Adam Scott. Adam Scott has like a perfect looking golf swing, and And his hand path, if you look at his hand path, it generally stays the same. He might create a little bit of, we say, hand depth. So you might see the hands go down, but that's simply happening because of my weight shift here into my lead side. So he's not physically going like this, up, and then hands are dropping down. So like this. And that's what I see a lot of players do when they shallow the club. We're not shallowing the path of our arms or the plane of our arms. We are literally just shallowing the angle of the club. So in a perfect world, I would have the hands going up on the same plane, but the angle of the club shallows. And ideally, the angle of the club shallowing happens because of momentum of my lower body. You see that there? So if I go like this, I rotate, that club shallows out. Same thing in baseball. If I'm here in baseball, see how we call that bat, or they call that bat lag in baseball. I was not necessarily a baseball player, but I know a lot about it. But that's potentially my assumption there, William, for you, why you're feeling loopy trying to get in the hands high, is goes into the downswing potentially. This is potential. Potentially, you're shallowing the plane of the arms too much and not going. And again, you could be also going outside of the plane too much to get the hands high. So try to pay attention to that, where you're seeing more of a straight back motion and the hands going high, and we're in essence staying on the same plane a little bit, but the angle. So in the move section, the angle into our wrist and the angle into the club itself there, William, that part shallows there onto the way down. So that's why it's actually really good to get hands higher, not just for speed, but it also creates a lot of room for the club to shallow and get more lag there on the way down. So that's a really good question. Hopefully that helps you out there, William. So my suggestion to you is, almost when you get the hands higher, almost feel like you're on the same plane into the downswing as the hands, but shallow the angle of the club, and of course dive into the move section as well. All right, Lloyd, let's go take a look here. You go, I am 72 with restricted movement. I've worked really hard over the past year to improve my drive. I hit it straight, consistent 69 to 71 club head speed. My drive is normally between 135 to 150. Should I live with that? What should I live with what I have and accept it since it is consistent? What do you recommend a possible improvement of drive? No, you shouldn't live with that there, Lloyd. Come on, we should be trying to swing as fast as we can in the golf swing. That's what we're about here, right? The top speed golf system. Now, I mean, there's you have to make it personal. So since you're saying there, Lloyd, that you're having you're restricted movement in the swing, so meaning that for you personally, that one of the factors, obviously, big turn, hip rotation, those are factors. So utilizing our core, utilizing our body to generate a lot of power, which it actually does. In your case there, Lloyd, what we may have to do is dive into generating more club head speed with hand speed, to put it simply. So meaning that if we can, movement wise into the hands, that means gaining you more lag without the ability to gain a lot more room as far as a turn. So you look at guys like John Rahm, you look at guys like Tony Finau, JB Holmes, three massively long hitters out there on the PGA Tour who do get good turns. I will say that they do get full turns, but the path of their hands aren't really going very far up. But the thing that all three of them have in common is that they have an insane amount of lag there. Of course, not to say that you have to have a crazy amount of lag there, Lloyd, but that's my recommendation for you. So actually what I would do is pay attention, like if you go in a 20-minute distance fix, do the drill that it's like the half back full follow through, where it focuses on the speed of the club head being really, really, really fast, right? So if this is the ball here, the speed of the club head being really fast right in near the golf ball. One drill I think that's really good to help you understand speed at the ball and hand speed specifically is swing to grip. So you literally grip it down here by the hosel, and you literally are going to be swinging the grip end here. So if I demonstrate it, just understand, if you take like a little swing, just some wires here, all I try to do is hear that swoosh. And if this is as far as you can go, measure your club head speed. You can feel that here. By swinging the grip, it gives you a lot of feedback here into these hands. You see I'm gaining a lot more lag. I'm trying not to hit a wire here, so bear with me. So I'm hearing that swoosh out here, and then maybe slowly increase the length of your swing, here, so that you're creating hand speed by doing that. And of course, try to incorporate that into where you're gripping the club like normal there, Lloyd. So that's what I usually recommend for those kind of in your situation where there's limited restriction or there's a lot of restriction in mobility. And if you really want to increase club head speed, it's going to be simply from hand speed and as much rotation as you can, of course, but with lag and the timing of your release. And that's how you'll get more club head speed. And measure your swing speed. Let me know how it goes, Lloyd. I'd be interested to see how that does for you. Okay. Lewis asks, just need to get better at understanding of compression on the downswing. We're told to pull, but then with forward shaft lean, that's where compression occurs. Do we push it down on the forward shaft lean? It's relative, right? So if we think of an actual term that you may hear a lot of when it comes to shaft lean and compression, it's called angle of attack. If you've ever heard that term before, if you watch much golf. Now, angle of attack there, Lewis, is of course the angle in which the club head's coming into the golf ball. Imagine like an airplane landing. And with irons and compression, we generally want to hit down on the ball, one for consistency and also ball striking wise. But it's not that much. So let's think of it here. 7-iron on the PGA Tour, an average angle of attack is going to be about negative 4.3 down onto the golf ball. And if we want to think about degrees, it's about a minute on the clock. So he's only going about negative 4.3 minutes down onto the golf ball on average of the 7-iron. Now, with a 3-wood, again, this is now PGA Tour average. With a 3-wood, tour players are about negative 2.3 with a 3-wood. So not a massive variance when it comes to a 7-iron and even a 3-wood. Then it's, again, negative 4 is not that much. When I see people who do hit down on the ball and maybe they come a little steep, that number can get to 9, 10, 11 degrees down on the golf ball when I give lessons to people. Or the other way around, if you're flipping your hands, that angle of attack can be up. So my recommendation for you there, Lewis, is pay attention to understand your ball flight. So if you see the ball and you're trying to generate shaft lean and you're seeing the ball take off still really high and you're not really creating much of a divot, that means you're technically still flipping your hands. So we need to be D-loft in the face there at impact more. So meaning, of course, compression-wise, that will mean more lead wrist bowed, angle of extension here in the right wrist. Now, if you feel like you're doing that, you see that on video that you're doing that, but you're not even still creating a divot. At that point, right, then I would definitely try to focus a little bit on a downward strike. We always want to make sure we're rotating through as we do that. But if we can get to where we're generating shaft lean, right, at impact, and you're not quite creating the divot, then you will have to lower your angle of attack. But if, again, to understand ball flight, if you're catching it chunky, maybe a little thin, and if you hit it well, but the ball takes off high, so not more like this, like an airplane, and it goes more here, especially in your shorter irons there, Lewis, then that means you are flipping at it and adding loft to the face. So pay attention to rotation of the hips, make sure they're clearing out of the way, because biomechanically it's literally impossible for us to generate shaft lean if we're not rotating open out of the way. And just pay attention to what the ball is doing. If you're making a divot after the ball, if the ball is taking off more here instead of here, and if you are making a divot after the ball, if you're not and you're getting good shaft length, then you can say, well, I can try to hit down on it just a little bit, and it's not that much there, Lewis. So hopefully that's a good question. Hopefully that answers your question there, Lewis. All right, Don F. Should you sweep your hybrids or hit them the same as your irons to try to take a divot? Actually, that's amazing that we're just talking. That's a great question following that one. So, Don, technically, there's not going to be a change, really. Really, there's not going to be a change in any club, even your driver. The only thing that does change there, Don, is that your ball position. So your ball position for driver woods is going to be further up into your stance, where, technically speaking, you're slightly coming on the up, the further up the balls into your stance. But again, it's very, very minimal. Like with the 7-iron, again, it's negative 4.3 angle of attack. With a 3-wood, it's negative 2.3. So it's literally 2-degree difference And again, that's like a minute on the clock. So it's not a massive change. So for you, Don, I would say probably to try to feel as if you feel like you're hitting your irons well, if you feel like you're compressing your irons well. But hybrid, this is very, very common, hybrids in woods people struggle with, potentially you're trying to help it up into potential. They're Don. This is hypothetical, but potentially you're trying to help it up into the air where we actually need to be still creating a little bit of shaft lean and still slightly hitting down on the ball to really compress it, hit the ball solid, and the launch will put it up in the air for you there, Don. So that's again another good question there, especially with hybrids and woods. Let me look at the questions I have here. I have about 12 minutes, so I'm going to try to go somewhat quickly with them. That was Don. Jeffrey T. He completed the move lessons and hitting the ball more constant, except with the pitching wedge and gap wedge, which I'm hitting high in the air and about 20 yards shorter. What could I possibly be doing that I'm not hitting those clubs as far as I used to? So if you go into the move section, I see this actually quite consistently here there, Jeffrey. So the move, again, focuses on shallowing the club, and particularly in the move that focuses on lead wrist bowing out, extension here in the right wrist. So this right here. In an ideal world, we want to rotate the hips open into the downswing and maintain that same angle. Right wrist extension here, lead wrist is bowed. What potentially could be happening, especially if you're saying with your wedges, they're Jeffrey high and losing some distance. I mean, I can almost kind of bet a lot of money that it's still going to be a little bit of we're adding a little loft to the face and we're maybe flipping our hands, especially if you're picking it clean, not really getting much of a distance, much of a divot. But since you're hitting it high and a lot shorter, like without a doubt, we're adding loft to the face. So the next part about the move part there for you there, Jeffrey, is on the way down. Right about here is we're really feeling now lead wrist bowed, right hand pointing down towards the ground, so that by the time we're at impact, lead wrist is bowed, right hand has extension, and the club face itself is very de-lofted. So with that pitching wedge, we should be still, and gap wedge, we should be still de-lofting the face with shaft lean there at impact. And it's same deal. That ball flight would still try to take off initially more here instead of more, balloony, I guess you can say there, Jeffrey. So hopefully that helps you out. So focus on impact, shaft lean, and imagine, changing what you see. Try to see a ball flight that takes off lower, even with those wedges there, Jeffrey. David Acker ball, of course, but a lot lower. Naturally, your brain will kind of tell you, okay, well, I need to get my hands more ahead, or like you're trying to hit it underneath some trees, that type of deal. All right, George, my PGA coach has me turning my left wrist lift on the way up into the backswing. I'm assuming left on the backswing, and keep it there until I hit the ball. This has allowed me to get a ton of lag and great distance. Is that okay? So your coach is saying you're trying to turn your left wrist to the left. So this would be my right. This would be left. Or you're trying to go more, what I'm saying there. So you're trying to bow it out. So we're doing more this way. So depending on what you're trying to go as far as pronation, supination, or bowing it out, which I was just describing there, and that's a good thing. That's really, really good. So that helps you shallow it out. So if it's this motion here there, George, like this, that's a good thing. It's almost like if you're riding a motorcycle the other direction. If you're going this way, motorcycle, we're going more here. So if he has you doing this on the way back, then I like that. I think that's really good. And then transition to the downswing, that gets that club shallow and the lead wrist is really bowed. And then when you get into impact, of course, that gives you a lot of shaft lean. The face is de-lofted and very, very square kind of through the ball. So that's a good move. I think that's really good there, George. If that's what your coach has you doing, he's a good coach for sure. I would definitely agree with him on that. No doubt about that. All right, Gordon A asks, is turning the wrist counterclockwise? Wow, a lot on the turning the wrist. If turning the wrist counterclockwise in the downswing is sufficient to shallow a club, or should we try to hit from the inside? Very relative, right? Or personal, I should say. If you are coming over the top, then you will try to have to shallow your plane a little bit as well when we're trying to bow the lead wrist or turn the wrist clockwise there. But also pay attention, if you're seeing that where we're trying to move the wrist to bow and that's not shallow in your plane, you may have to look on sequencing again, making sure that the lower body is starting the downswing early in the downswing. That's one, and then the other one as well is pay attention to arms. Is your trail elbow internally rotating here on the way down, or is it staying more out to where the club steepens out? So there's a couple factors there, Gordon, when it comes to your wrists and shallowing the club. But for sure, the wrists alone can definitely shallow the club, and that's when we bow it out there on the way down. But my assumption is, again, we don't want to necessarily have the arms drop down, but we want to make sure that the sequencing, we want to make sure that was Clay there. We want to make sure that the sequencing into the downswing starts with lower body first and then rotating open. So hopefully that answers your question there, Gordon. I'm going to try to go fast. I only have a few minutes here, and I got several questions. Wow. Yeah, bowed out. Good, George. Thanks. Thanks, Rob. Let me go ahead. I appreciate that. I missed the review on hip rotation. Can you review the moments from the top to contact position? That's kind of you might have to kind of rewind that word, Dave. I'm going to answer these here really quick because that's like a very long one with a few minutes left. So this will be pre-recorded. You can watch this again. Sorry there, David, but I would love to answer. I want to get to everyone's questions. Let me see here. Ted asks, when I try to apply a tennis racket drill on my golf swing, I shank the ball a lot. Any thoughts on what could be happening? I see that actually quite a bit. There's two factors that lead to that. When we apply a tennis racket drill here, when we're shallowing the club, a lot of people will do is I see the path go too much into out, and hips early extend, and they go this direction. You can see that brings the hosel in. The other side of it is actually the other direction. When we shallow the club out, and as we rotate, the club head works still too much out this direction. So that's mostly, by the way, when people do shank the ball, the club head is working outside the golf ball. So I got my mouse here. So if I go here, when the club head works out to in, you can see that also brings in a shank. So my recommendation then for you, Ted, is that when you're working on tennis racket drill, make sure that you are rotating open and the club head stays shallow and downswing. If you rotate open, that club head is going to come in a very, very square path and also very, very de-lofted. And so you should bring in more the middle of the face. But it could be two ways. It's all really relative to every person there, Ted. Lloyd, not being critical, but FYI, your video is blurry. Next week, maybe clean the lens. Yeah, well, I don't have a good one compared to Quentin, but I don't ever do these. So, so I'm just gonna leave my laptop the way it is there, Lloyd. But sorry about that. I appreciate the feedback. John C. I'm 65. I started golf at 38. I took 10 to 15 lessons a year, and no one focused on the hip turn. No matter how hard I try, I can't seem to do it. What can I do? It is going to take, something that you've done for a long time. It is going to take a lot of over exaggeration. At that point, to be completely transparent with you there, John, at that point, there may be a little bit of pain as in, going through the struggle with hitting the ball solid, especially if you're doing something for so long that I'm sure you can get there, but it's just going to be a factor of trust. If that makes sense there, John, and going through that initial just grinding it out and going through the over exaggerations of hip rotation and, going through like the compression line series and the straight line release series, things like that, or going to the search bar there, John, and just type in hip rotation, doing that for like, I challenge you for doing it for a month solid and not even worry about what the ball does, not even worry about the contact, and just try to get there. And since you've been playing for a long time, I'm sure that you'll be able to figure out contact, but just kind of really over exaggerate it because it's going to take a lot. It's like when you brush your teeth and you're changing up your routine. You've been doing it for, for me, 30 years, brushing for 33 years of brushing my teeth, whatever. If I try to change it up, it's going to be crazy and I'm not going to want to do it. But I have to initially go through that phase of forcing myself to retrain the motions of brushing my teeth. You see what I'm saying there, John? So typically that's what I see with players who've been playing for a long time and they're trying to make a change. It just takes that absolute repetitions and grind session to retrain muscle memory. And that's mostly it there, John. All right, but good question. Really good question. Steve E., I can't stop looking away from the ball before the strike. All clubs, including putts. Uh, pay attention to posture. If you want to think of a technique wise, making sure you're not losing posture out of it. Pay attention to how you're rotating. Well, you said putts, so um, you go back to the old school thing, like what Jack Nicklaus said, he would really be fixated on one part of the ball, like one dimple in the golf ball there, to really stay fixated. I would say I wouldn't worry about it too much. Honestly, you look at like tour players, you ask them, a lot of them say, well, it's actually the ball's blurry, like it just gets in the way, and so, or you look at Hunter Stenson, he's looking in front of the ball at impact. So is Dustin Johnson. So is Tommy Fleetwood, where their head is actually turned a little bit at impact. So they're looking away. So it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but putting wise, I probably would try to stay a little bit focused on the ball there. Alberto asked, Dustin Johnson cups his hands during his backswing. He actually he gets flexion here. He doesn't cup his lead wrist. He bows out his lead wrist here. He does get a lot of extension here into his right wrist. When I do this, I tend to hook it a lot. Because the face is really shut when you do that. So Dustin Johnson, he's a little bit of an outlier there, Alberto, is that when he does get a lot of flexion here in the lead wrist and extension here, the right wrist, that does shut the face as much as he does it. So outlier for him, if you look him at impact, his hips are extremely, extremely open. And so more open than tour average, more open than most guys out there on tour. So unless you rotate your body open, you will hook the ball every single time. So I wouldn't really model that motion of Dustin Johnson, but you have to look at the factors there, is that he's very, very open with his hips. Plus, post-impact, he's still very much here. So he's holding the face open. So you can't let the club, if you're going to have that very shut face like Dustin Johnson does, which is okay, you just can't let the club face release at all, or else it's going to hook on you a lot. And you have to rotate really, really open, or else it's going to hook on you a lot. So it's kind of like the outlier there with him. And I think I was speaking with Claude Harmon about that, his coach, a while ago. And that's exactly what he has to do. That's why he focuses. You look on his swing, especially with wedges, he focuses a lot on clearing his chest open to make sure he doesn't get that face releasing at all. So last question of the day is David C. asks, I missed the review. Oh, that's the hip rotation one. Sorry there, David. That's a long one, but pretty much what you want is, up and back with the trail hip, up and back with the lead hip, and, making sure that we're utilizing our feet to help us with that rotation. All right, so it's about lunchtime for me, and it is 12 o'clock, and I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you so much for allowing me to cover. I had to cover for Quentin today, and it's very rare when I do, so I appreciate you guys listening to me and asking amazing, amazing questions. Those are fantastic. If there's anything I can do to help you guys out in the future, definitely reach out to me. If you want to I do in-person lessons here almost every single day, other than really today because of this. Here at Heathrow Country Club, email me, robin@topspeedgolf.com. We can get that scheduled out. Mike, I know you tuned in earlier, frequent lesson guy of me. It's actually his whole family, and which is fantastic. And unlimited review program, the online lessons where I can work with you virtually through that. Email me, robin@topspeedgolf.com. I think right now I am filled up, but you can join the waiting list as well as any of the other instructors. Everybody's fantastic. Everyone's really, really good. So I hope to do this again. I always enjoy these office hours when they're very rare for me, but I appreciate you guys tuning in and keep a lookout. Hopefully we'll be starting our distance clinics soon here in Orlando. That's what I host here in Orlando, and those are always a lot of fun. So thanks. Best of luck in your guys' game. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for allowing me to answer your questions. Great questions today. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks, and take care.